This episode of Just the Tip-Sters is sponsored by Clean Spa Bath & Body. That's clean with a K. Cleanspa.com. Clean Spa. Prepare to smell delicious.
From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
As discussed in our previous email,
If you've got a tip for Melissa, a juicy tidbit from a delicious rumor, something about a murder investigation the press isn't reporting, and you don't know why, the real reason for the actual season, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. Just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host, borrowing trouble and paying it back with interest, Melissa Morgan.
more cowbell. I think you know me better than that by now, Producer Mark. I have only credit that does not charge any interest.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
You don't. Oh.
Yeah, I don't
okay.
pay back anything with interest.
I see.
I'm, done some shuffling.
True.
And yeah, I have no interest only.
All right. Well, you are paying back the trouble that you have borrowed.
No, I usually keep it. I like to keep it and hoard it and let it fester inside of me to where it's just like I'm brimming with like anger and hatred.
That's what makes you special.
Special is one word. Yeah. Special is watching with you old episodes of Flea Market Flip,
Oh, it's fun.
where we attach bizarre behaviors to sweet people who are competing against each other for $5,000 fucking dollars.
We're not nice.
Well, you're not.
Well, you're not either.
I'm not either.
I mean,
but it just makes me happy to say you're not.
We go on the not pay-per-view, but the thing where you can watch
On demand?
On demand.
Yeah.
We go to the on-demand channel, and when we have breakfast on Sunday mornings, and look at old Flea Market Flip episodes, and just incredibly destroy everybody who's not, including the small children sometimes who appear.
Yeah, the Mommy and Me or Daddy and Me's episodes. And I mean, it's $5,000. It isn't, it isn't like $8 million or something, but it's we attach really awful personality traits to these people who I'm sure are wonderful human beings.
Yeah, but I think we know. I think we know
You're
what's
right.
going
They're probably
on.
terrible. And we end up just like laughing and assigning them like, personality quirks that are really awful.
Yeah, that little 10-year-old girl that was
wearing the unicorn horn.
Yeah. We think
She actually was sweet.
I think I was talking about the one in the blue
In the
dress.
blue dress,
The
yeah.
other one that was absolutely she lost, and I have a feeling that
Someone's gonna die.
Yeah, well, there's going to be some slashed tires or something because that little kid
Keyed
was,
car.
Yeah.
She two little girls and their moms were competing for this $5,000. And one little girl, and her mom was almost as small as she was. She was a very small mom. And one little girl wore a unicorn headband the whole time. And she was, I expected her to be a lot more annoying. And she was actually pretty sweet.
She was.
But then her competitor and her mother, they didn't really look very much alike. I'm not sure that kid was really hers. But
see what we do?
curly hair,
You see what we
and then
do?
the girl had straight blonde hair. It was
That's a
very
good
weird.
point. It's a good point.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think she's adopted, and that's probably what the problem is that she is a demon child from
She's probably
from an
Rosemary's
orphanage.
baby.
Yeah, she's adopted from a terrible family and of monsters, and her and her mom wore matching dresses. And it was ugly.
Right,
and
they
I'm
did.
fairly sure the unicorn girl and her mom are walking to their car and a Molotov cocktail hits them in the head. Because 8-year-old Rosemary's baby and her mom.
Yeah.
Her mom seemed pretty... it was very cute at the beginning. They're like, but, it's going to be fun. But remember, there are no losers. Everyone wins. And the little girl's like...
I will eat your soul!
Yeah, kind of.
We must win!
Yeah, it was interesting. So that's the kind of exciting shit that we do on the weekends, Tipsters. In case you're ever wondering what sort of magic happens around the old homestead studio.
It's magic, all right.
It's me and Mark making fun of people that compete on
and
flea
me
market
getting
flip.
cream cheese all over my hands because I can't.
You don't know how to do anything with it. Peanut butter or cream cheese is useless around you because you will end up wearing more of it than it ever gets down your gullet.
Then I get it all over the refrigerator.
And the handles of the refrigerator. It is a little like having a small boy in the house.
I'm thinking about putting a little dirt play area in the house so that I could just get in there.
Yeah, just get in there
it over with.
Yeah, I like that. Let's
dig
up.
Put a couple of Tonka trucks in there. Yeah.
Let's dig up part of the flooring, go down past the subflooring to the dirt.
Yeah.
And then that's Mark's little play area.
Yeah, there you go.
And you get it all out there. I'll throw you jars of peanut butter and little tubs of Philly cream cheese, and you just knock yourself out in there, little Marky.
I'll mix it in with the dirt, and I'll put it in the back of the Tonka pickup truck. The Tonka dump truck.
Dump truck. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. That would save me so much money in Swiffer items that I need to replenish constantly. Swiffer floor moppers. Because
see what I did here, folks? I beat her to the punch. I made fun of myself first.
But I still managed to get a couple in there.
Yeah, I got a couple of elbows to the ribs.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm known for, elbowing to the ribs. I am also known to forget to say thank you to our beloved Tipsters, our patrons who have joined Patreon. It is such a beautiful thing, and we appreciate it more than we can ever tell you. I never wanted to do this, and now jumping on board, I think around our 80th episode, we are just so overwhelmed with the support that we get from you, Tipsters. It's really amazing. And we want you to know you don't have to contribute to the Patreon account. It is a lovely thing, but what we would like you to consider doing is going to Apple Podcasts and rate or review the podcast if you like it. If you don't like it, it's called Everyone Else Must Die. If you do like it, it's called Just the Tipsters.
With a dash.
With a dash, just the tip-sters. Dash sters. And if you have a story idea, which is if you are listening to the back episodes, know that we love suggestions and we like to cover cases that you want to hear. And we've been really blessed to get some really fascinating cases sent to us, given to us, suggested to us. You can call us at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. You can rate, review, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, TuneIn, any place you listen. We would be really grateful if you could subscribe, rate, or review. And we also have our email address, which is jttipsters@gmail.com. That's jttipsters with an S. So as you know, our episode is sponsored by Clean Spa by Jennifer Hardaway, and today we're going to focus on her massage products. Like any brilliant human being, Jennifer Hardaway knows that the benefits of massage are numerous. Improved circulation, muscle relaxation, range of motion that you can't always have unless you have someone working on you. It obviously increases your endorphin levels. It has helped me so very much lately with some soreness in my muscles. It's been amazing. And Clean Spa offers a full line of butters, oils, and lotions that can enhance any massage experience. So you can take your favorite Clean Spa product with you to your next massage appointment. And massage therapists love her products as much as you do. And then in between your appointments, you can use your own Clean Spa products to massage your neck, your hands, your legs, all the parts you can reach that you don't have to be a licensed massage therapist to do for yourself, for self-massage. And all of these products are available in dozens of unique fragrances, and you can design them yourself on the Clean Spa website. As most of you know, I'm really partial to the things that smell like vanilla, and Jennifer offers a huge array of scents that you can put into the butters, the oils, the lotions, and have your own personalized massage experience. So check out all of Clean Spa's bath and body products at cleanspa.com. That's clean with a K, and enter promo code TIPSTERS at the checkout, and you get 15% off your total order. Clean spa. Prepare to smell delicious. So I'm a murder nerd, and I was fascinated when I heard that Frank Bender, who is an artist and a sculptor, had started the Vidocq Society in 1990. And I'm a Frank Bender fan. He is just a spectacular human being. You might be familiar with his work that was on America's Most Wanted. He was, in my mind, singularly responsible for the capture of John List, the family annihilator who killed his family, and including his mother and wife and children, set them up in the ballroom of his mansion that he could no longer afford and was going to be foreclosed on, and moved to several different places across the country and started a new life. But always fell into his old habits of being an accountant and wearing the same type of clothing, hairstyle, glasses, became Sunday school teacher, drove the church bus. He just went into his old habits. He just happened to kill people and then move on from there. But Frank Bender combed through hundreds of thrift stores looking for the type of glasses that John List would wear, and he was convinced that he would still be wearing a similar large square style glasses, glass frames that he had always worn, and I'll be damned if he wasn't right. And his bust of John List, his sculpture, which was pretty magnificent, going by pictures of his parents saying that John would probably have the same facial features, kind of the sagging jowls as he aged, and the thinning hair on top of the head. And Frank Bender made an almost perfect replica of a man who'd been on the run for 30 years and aged, quite a bit.
It was pretty remarkable.
Remarkable. So when Frank Bender started the Vidocq Society in 1990, I was like, this is such a wonderful thing. They meet the third Thursday of every month in Philadelphia. They take only submissions from law enforcement, not from family members of victims. And they are comprised of ex-FBI agents, detectives, retired, some still on the job, criminalists, forensic specialists, artists. I mean, it's spectacular, this group of human beings, and they meet it's a nonprofit. They meet, once a month and help law enforcement solve some of their toughest cases. And I have made the suggestion to a couple of the law enforcement agencies we have interviewed over the last year and a half for people who have unsolved cases. This could be a really great resource. So when you find out that Frank Bender has started this really interesting society, and you wonder where the fuck did this come from? And then you grow to love Frank Bender even more because it is named after Eugene Francois Vidocq, who was a French resident and a spectacular human being, and probably a narcissist and a sociopath because of his ability to charm anyone. And he, started a life of really shitty crime and then turned it around, probably still accessing the shittier parts of his underworld life, but using them for good. So he's a fascinating sociopath, psychopath, obviously a brilliant man. And the fact that Frank Bender named the society after him makes me love Frank Bender even more. So this episode is explaining how the father of criminology, truly the father of criminology, how Eugene Vidocq changed how we look at police work, criminals, criminal behavior, forensics before it was even a thing. Hundreds of years before it was a thing, how this man, this one interesting, fascinating, at some points awful, but ultimately somewhere deep down there, decent human being, formed so much of what we know today as law enforcement. So Eugene Vidocq was born in July of 1775 in France, and he was born into a family that had money. His father was very well educated, for those days. and he was very wealthy. He was a corn dealer, and you don't know how important that is, I guess, but so many things are made from corn. And Father Vidocq made a good living, and he and his wife manned several different businesses. And Eugene, one of 6 kids, was the troublemaker. At the age of 14, he stole 2 of his parents' silver plates and sold them, and had run through the money within one day. Now, his father figured out it was him and had him arrested 3 days later. So he is 14 years old. He is in jail, a local jail, and it takes 10 days before he finally finds out that it's his father that arranged for him to be arrested to teach him a lesson. And it really didn't deter him. It didn't deter him at all. So not long after that, he's released, and he steals a large amount of money from the cash box of his parents' bakery. And what he wanted to do was to embark to the Americas. But he was defrauded one night, probably in some sort of a, dice game or something, or card game, and he was left penniless. So to survive, he's, 14 years old, and he works with a group of traveling entertainers, and they, are not good to the people that are, tagging along with them. They beat him, and the work is really hard, but he, I think he might appreciate that in his weird psychopathy of a young teenage bad boy. He gets promoted from the stable boy to playing a fake Caribbean cannibal who eats raw meat.
Ooh, but that sounds delicious.
It sounds awful.
Especially it's in the late 1700s in France, raw meat.
Yeah.
Yum.
And he can't handle it. He gets, he's like, I can't do this. So he switches from being a fake Caribbean cannibal to a group of puppeteers. Now, no offense to ventriloquists, I'm not sure what's worse, eating probably not clean raw meat or having to deal with a bunch of puppeteers. I'm not sure which is worse.
It's hard to choose.
It really is. It's terrible. So he gets, sort of banished from that group because he flirted with the young wife of, the owner of the carny. So he ends up finding a job as an assistant to a peddler, but he knows this isn't going to last. So when the peddler moves around and ends up back in his hometown, he runs away and goes back to his family, and his mother welcomes him with open arms, as moms will do. And she lives a nice long life, and he does take care of her in her older years. So there is something in his heart. I'm not sure what it is, but when you find out, what an interesting, this man is really, he did more in his 82 years than I could do in 7 lifetimes, good and bad. It's just like there was never a day where the sun set on him not doing something. He just is, I don't know if he ever slept. I mean, he's just a fascinating man, and starting from such a young age. When I was 13, 14, I'm babysitting in the summer so I can earn money to buy my clothes for school. And he's like stealing his parents' shit, and I'm going to run off to the Americas.
Yeah, at least he was stealing shit that he was like spending on. When I was 14, I was stealing logos, those little logos off of cars with my friends. Were taking screwdrivers and taking car logos off, and we couldn't do anything with them. We were just being bad.
Oh my God, I had no idea.
Well, we got caught. So
I'm married to a criminal?
Ex-criminal.
Wow.
Yeah. I shoplifted too.
I heard about that. I did hear about that.
Yeah, they taught me a lesson real quick. All they had to do was put me in handcuffs and take me back to my mom's, where my mom was working at the time, and that's all it took. But
you sound a little like Eugene Vidocq.
No, he seems like he's actually done some good for society.
Well, he has, but he did some, he did some bad too. So let's just, he's a fascinating creature for sure. So in 1791, he enlists in the Bourbon Regiment. There's a lot of French words in here that I had to look up because I don't really, know a lot of all this stuff. But he had this reputation as being this expert fencer, and it was true. He was sort of like everything he touched turned to gold. I mean, he got arrested, 874 times, but he ended up escaping 875 times and, getting things, his sentences commuted. And I mean, he's one of those, he's like a cat with 27 lives. Like he just keeps landing on his feet. So he enlists in the Bourbon regiment, and his, expert fencing comes into play. And within 6 months, he had challenged 15 people to a duel at a young age, and he'd end up killing 2 of them. So, he's not really a model soldier, but he spent 14 days in jail because of the killing the 2 people.
Oh, I guess back in the day, all you needed to do is challenge somebody to a duel, and if you kill them,
you get like a week.
Little slap on the wrist.
You get like a week each murder or death. So
no dueling, Eugene. No dueling.
Bad, Vidocq, bad. So he's 2 weeks in jail, and while he's in there, he helps a fellow inmate successfully escape. There's really no jail that can hold him, which I think makes it, all the more interesting that he's perfect to become like the head of the police agency in France. And I mean, he's kind of amazing. So he participated in a couple of battles, and he was promoted to the corporal of the Grenadiers, which is a group of people who were assigned to have grenades. And so he had grenades and grenade launchers, which I'm never sure that was a good thing for him to do.
Wow.
Yeah. So he challenged a non-commissioned officer to a duel during, his promotion ceremony when he gets promoted to the corporal. And the sergeant major was like, I'm not going to duel you. So he hit him. So when you strike a superior officer, you could get a death sentence. So he's like, you know what? I don't think this is for me. So he deserts that army.
Okay, wait, let me get this straight. If you challenge somebody to a duel and you kill him, you get 2 weeks in jail. But if you slap a superior officer, they cut your head off.
I think that makes sense. No? Is that not? No?
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
So he deserts that army and enlists in the Chasseurs, concealing his identity. He was an amazing fraudster. He's kind of amazing. So he did fight in some pretty big battles, but then in 1793, he, was like, I'm going to identify as a deserter. I'm identifying as a deserter, and my sexuality is none of your fucking business. I'm going to identify as just as a deserter. So he follows a general who was fleeing after a failed coup that he tried to take over. And so he and the general end up in an enemy camp. And then Vidocq returns to the French camp and is like, look, I can't go with these enemies. I'm a deserter, but I'm now identifying as coming back. So a captain intercedes for him, and he's allowed to rejoin the Chasseurs. And then later on, he resigns from the army. And the reason given in the notes is he's no longer welcome. And he's now coming up on his 18th birthday. He has done
Wait a
more.
Minute. He's only 18 at this point?
Yep.
Oh, my God.
So he's almost 18, and he is given a reputation as a womanizer. And he kind of, it doesn't matter if the chick is married or to who. So he, is kind of a womanizer, and he ends up with a bunch of duels that he wins because he's him. He's Vidocq. So he's imprisoned in the Baudet's prison for an entire year, January of 1794 to January of 1795. And then when he's barely 19 and he gets out, he marries Anne-Marie Louise Chevalier because she said she was pregnant. But she wasn't, and there was no baby. And he is like, well, I'm not happy with this. I married you. I'm barely 19 and you're a liar. And she was cheating on him with another soldier. So
sounds like he met his match.
I thought so too. I thought she was his, but it turns out his third wife is actually the love of his life. And ironically, in a icky way, she was a third cousin. So he marries his cousin, but that's his third wife, and they end up together for 17 years until she passes away. And I think she was the love of his life, and he never married again in the end of his life. But so his first wife, at 19, we all make mistakes, right? Hopefully we all don't lie and say we're pregnant, to get some rogue to marry you. So he left again for the army, just was like, I'm leaving. And he didn't see his wife, for 10 years. And their divorce, she sends him divorce papers 10 years later in 1805. But he's in another army stint. So, but he didn't stay long in the army. He spent most of his time in Brussels, and it was kind of a hideout for criminals at the time. And he supported himself there after he left the army doing small frauds. Small frauds. I mean, he's a really fascinating dude. He is once again arrested for being a deserter, and he doesn't have valid papers. And so then when they ask his identity, he says, "Oh, I am Monsieur Rousseau." And, while they're still trying to check his papers, he escapes from there.
I love this guy.
He's kind of amazing. So he's still kind of traveling under the alias of Rousseau, and he joined something called the Flying Army in 1795. And it's a army that consists of officers who really didn't have any commissions or regiments. They were raiders. They, kind of cut routes for the army to follow. They don't have ranks, but they fake ranks. They fake uniforms, but they kind of manage to stay away from real battles. And Vidocq started as a lieutenant, but then he promotes himself to captain.
That's a neat trick.
It's really cool. He's like, I'm getting a new uniform that I'm going to fake, and I'm going to call myself a captain. And he did. And he met a rich widow, and she, became very, very fond of him, which he had a way, as most, psychopaths do. And he had a co-conspirator this time that convinced the rich widow that he was a young nobleman on the run because of the French Revolution. But he has a heart. So just before the wedding, he confesses to her, "Look, it's not real. I'm, kind of a deserter, and my last name's not Rousseau, and I'm not a captain. I just called myself that." And she forgave him, and, they didn't have to go through with the wedding, and she didn't want to marry a fraudster. And, he leaves the city, but she gives him a huge cash gift. So I don't know if he had a forked tongue with a wart on it, or
wow,
I don't know, but chicks dig him. But okay, so in March of 1795, he moves to Paris, and he squandered all the money that the rich widow gave him entertaining women. Surprise! So he goes back north and joins a group of Bohemian gypsies, and he leaves that group when he falls in love with another woman. And she left him for a real soldier as opposed to the fake soldier that he was. And this is the really bad part. He beats both of them, the soldier and the woman that he had left the gypsies for. So he is a wife beater or girlfriend beater, abuser, domestic violence monster. But the soldier sued him. So the woman, I guess, didn't have. I do have to say later on, he does kind of advance women's rights, because he hires women to do jobs that men and women can work next to each other and get the same pay. And he was really called out for that. So he might, hit chicks who cheat on him, which is terrible. I'm not saying that's a good thing to do. But in some part of him, he respects women, even if he is a womanizer and a woman hit her, because he thinks they deserve the same pay, and he gives them the same work. Now, I don't mean physical labor, but the work in his agencies to solve crimes. He's an interesting fucker. Let's just go to that part. So he's sentenced to 3 months in prison for hitting the soldier. I have no idea if that included hitting his ex-girlfriend or not. But so he's 20 years old, and he is kind of adapting to life in prison. As much as he enjoys escaping, I think it's more of the game for him. So he befriends a group of men in prison, and they had all been sentenced to 6 years for stealing. So here's where his gift for forging comes into play. One of the prisoners is suddenly released the following day, and an inspector notices that the pardon that this soldier was given was forged. And Vidocq is like, oh, no, I didn't do that. These other two guys did that, and I let them borrow my cell. Because he was a soldier, he got a cell to himself. And he said these other prisoners, these other inmates, said that it was too noisy in the common area, so could they use his cell to do their forging? And the other two inmates are like, look, yeah, we used his cell, but he fucking helped us. He did the fabrication, and it's his idea. I don't even know how he got the implements, but he figured out a way. So he added 3 more months to his sentence by doing that. So I guess his ex-girlfriend, Francine, who he had supposedly hit along with the soldier she was cheating with, forgave him because he escapes several times in the weeks following with the help of Francine. But he's always captured.
Wait, he hits her. Okay, maybe it is the fork tongue. I give up.
So, yes, she helps him escape, but he always gets caught and, recaptured. And after one of his escapes, he ends up with another woman, and Francine caught him. And, Francine is like, you know what? I'm going to tell him where you are. And he's recaptured. He's picked up by the police. And they say, oh, Francine has been found with multiple knife wounds. And he's like, I didn't do that. I was fucking another girl. And Francine's like, he's right. He was fucking another girl and I stabbed myself. So the charges are dropped against him. I guess Francine's picker was also broken. And he and Francine stopped communicating. And then she was convicted and sentenced to 6 months after she helped other prisoners escape. So she must...
Can I tell you how much I'm enjoying this?
He's a scoundrel.
He used to surround himself with other scoundrels.
Yeah, and he does his whole entire life. It's really amazing to me, his whole life. So he's, been in and out of prison. He's escaped. He's really, he's like 20 and had a really bizarre, interesting life. So he's in another prison and he is waiting for several months to be transferred back to a prison called Bagnères in Brest, France. It's Brest, in case you're giggling to yourself. And he's told he's going to be toiling in the galleys. So while he's in this prison waiting to be transferred to another prison, a fellow inmate teaches him the martial art of savate, which actually translates to old shoe, but it's French foot fighting. It's French foot fighting, which when you see pictures of it and drawings of it, it's mixed martial arts. It's MMA fighting today.
Wow.
It's amazing. It's like a combination of British boxing with your hands and, kicking with your bare feet. It's really fascinating. So he was taught this by another inmate. He attempts to escape in October of 1797 and fails, and he gets placed in a dungeon for 8 days. So in February of 1798, he is finally sent to the Bagnères prison in Brest, and he escaped while he's dressed as a sailor. It's just a few days later, he's apprehended due to his lack of papers. I know. It's like there's no prison that can keep him. So he's apprehended a few days later because he doesn't have his papers, and the police don't recognize him as an escaped convict. So he claims to be now Auguste Duval. So he's no longer Monsieur Rousseau. He is now Auguste Duval. And while they're checking his claim, he's put into a prison hospital. And he stole a nun's habit and escaped the hospital in disguise.
This is too much.
It's amazing. And this is the guy who ends up forming, he's the father of criminology. I'm telling you.
I guess, who else could be, I guess, right?
Well, but he has such an interesting outlook. All of his life, all of his businesses, he hired ex-convicts and prisoners and criminals. And it wasn't like, if I keep them close to me, they won't, be stealing my shit. He thought they had knowledge And he was right. I mean, he was right.
He was right, of course.
Yeah. So he, his escape dressed as a nun, escaped the prison hospital dressed as a nun, and he found a job as a cattle driver. And with this capacity, he's able to pass through Paris and then back to Brussels. So he's in Rotterdam, and he has a short career as a privateer, which is a private owner of a ship that's commissioned by the government to haul ammunition or things that they may need for their armies. So he's arrested while he's in Brussels, but he identifies himself as Eugene Vidocq. So he's transferred back to Bagnères prison in 1799. He fails to escape, an escaped attempt, but then in 1800, he escapes on March 6th with the help of a prostitute.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So it's now 1800, and his father had died in 1799, and he didn't know. So he goes home to his mother, finds out that his father has died, and he hides in his mom's house for 6 months, and then he's recognized while out, and so he flees again. So he assumes an identity of an Austrian, and he spends some time with a widow. And in 1802, he has built up a reputation as a businessman, and he thinks, okay, it's finally safe for me to bring my mom to live with me and my, girlfriend widow. So he brings his mom, but his past, invariably catches up with him, and he's brought back to Louvre. And he learns that in his absentia, he had been sentenced to death because of all of his crimes.
They'd finally had enough of them.
Mm-hmm. But with the help of a local procurator general, whose name was Ransom, he filed an appeal and spent the following 5 months in prison waiting for a retrial. And it turns out that they just, they give him, it's like, just get the fuck out. And he gets word from his ex-wife that the divorce is final. Took 10 years, but they're divorced in 1805. So he's like unattended for just a minute, and he jumps out. He jumps out the window. They're like taking their time sentencing him and waiting, and there's no decision on what's going to happen. So he's like, fuck you. So he jumps out a window and ends up in the river, and he spends 4 more years on the run. This time he is in Paris, and he happens to witness the execution of one of the men that he had, spent time in prison with. And he thought, you know what? I need to turn my life around. So this triggered some sort of thing in him. He's like, I think I'm gonna try to become on the right side of the law. So he takes his mom and his girlfriend, and they move several times over the following years. But he's so recognizable that a lot of people, say, that's him. So he tries really hard to become like a legitimate merchant. And one of his former wives finds him and blackmails him. Sort of sounds like what happened to Alexander Hamilton, kind of. And a couple of former convicts force him to fence stolen goods for him, like you owe us. So in July of 1809, it's just a few days before his 34th birthday, he's arrested again. And he's like, I can't do this anymore. I have to stop living on the fringe of society. Can I become an informant? And the police are like, huh. So like a few days later, they're like, you know what? We're going to accept your offer. So they put him in a softer prison, and he starts working as a spy. So he, keeps working in this prison. He sounds out inmates, and any information that he gets from them, he sends through his girlfriend, Annette, to the actual chief of police of Paris. And he actually said, I might have become a perpetual spy because nobody could figure out the connection between me and how this information was getting, from prisoners to the police. And it's like, yeah, that's another part of your psychopathy, dude. You thought, no one's ever going to, know it's me. But it's 21 months after he started becoming the informant. He's released from jail on the recommendation of the police chief, I think because he gave him such great information on prisoners and robberies and murders. So to not raise suspicions among the other inmates, they made this is how smart the chief of police was. Chief of Police Henri made his release look like an escape. So on
Very smart.
I know. This is the stuff of novels and in movies and TV shows, and it was real. That's what's so interesting.
It's really entertaining.
He had a fascinating life, and you'll see how he appears in pop culture and literature and theater and movies in the future. But so the chief of police makes it look like he escaped on March 25th of 1811. So he's sort of free, but he's not really free because he still has an obligation to the chief of police, Henry. So he kind of continues to work as a secret agent, and he uses all of his criminal contacts and his reputation as a criminal to gain people's trust. He disguises himself as an escaped convict and kind of immerses himself in the criminal life again, and to learn about, planned crimes that could be, committed. And he even actually took part in felonies in order to suddenly turn on his partners and then arrest them, like a citizen's arrest. So when criminals kind of began to suspect him, he started using, disguises and other identities to continue to throw off, suspicion of him being a spy. So he informally organizes in 1811 a plainclothes unit that he calls the Security Brigade. So it's kind of a police department, and the actual police recognize the value of these sort of civilian agents. Again, sort of a auxiliary police. So in 1812, the experiment was officially converted to what's called the Security Police Unit under the, actual police. So Vidocq is actually appointed as its leader in 1813.
So he's now kind of actually part of the cops.
He is. And in 1813, Napoleon Bonaparte signed a decree that made the brigade a state security police force. So from this day on, it is called the Sûreté Nationale, so, security brigade. The Sûreté initially had 8 people employed, and then 12, and then by 1823, there's 20 employees. And then a year later, they expand to 28 secret agents. And then there's 8 people who work secretly for the Sûreté, but instead of a salary, they receive licenses to open gambling halls. So 8 of the 28 secret agents, I know, 8 of the 28 secret agents don't get paid in francs. They get licenses to open gambling halls. So a lot of, Vidocq's employees, his subordinates, are ex-criminals, and he would even hire them like fresh out of prison. He had this soft spot for other criminals because he himself, was one. And I mean, it's amazing to me, how he thought. It's like, I don't want to distance myself from my weird past. I want to use my past to move forward and do something. I'm not saying he's like all heart, like this guy is just, turned the corner and he is all good. Because he still had his hands in lots of weird shit. But he understood the value of a street education as well as, obviously, a book learning education, which he had both. So he personally trained all of the agents that he hired straight out of prison. And then he selected the correct disguise that these agents would be wearing based on the kind of job. And he would actually go out looking for criminals to hire. And he would outsmart, people on the street by pretending to be a beggar, pretending to be like the husband of a very, angry woman. He even faked his own death. I mean, he's a really interesting fellow. So it's at the beginning of the French Restoration in 1814 that Vidocq and the Sûreté Nationale try to contain the situation in Paris. So he tries to arrest those who exploit the post-revolutionary situation, claiming to have been aristocrats. Even though he is like this supreme fraud specialist, he arrests people that, say they were aristocrats, but really weren't. So he himself, in 1817, was involved in 811 arrests. He himself, 811 arrests. 15 assassins, 38 criminals who fence items. And by 1820, he has reduced crime in Paris substantially. He himself and his band of merry criminals have reduced crime in Paris so much so that his income is elevated to 5,000 francs, but he also works off the clock as a private investigator for money.
Oh.
He starts the first private investigation agency. He is, here's this man who is a kind of a chief of police, also a wanted criminal. He's never been prosecuted for his, forgery conviction. So many different complaints against him. He has either escaped from or they haven't found him. But finally, in 1817, he is given a complete and full pardon by King Louis XVIII. So there, as with every position, there is a change of the guard. And after Louis XVIII dies, his successor is the ultra-reactionary Charles X. And he sort of started an oppressive reign against police agencies and agents. And, a lot of them he fires or takes away their, original position. And, it's sort of an uncomfortable time for Vidocq. He mentions that several of Vidocq's agents are spending time in brothels and bars. And he's like, yeah, they have to. That's where they get information on lowlifes. Where do you think you get information on lowlifes? At the library? No, you got to hang out in bars and brothels. And he receives 2 official warnings from Charles X. And then in 1827, he's 52 years old and has done so much in his life. And he's like, you know what? Later, fucker. And he resigns. And it's understandable, if you're kind of a rogue filly and, or not filly, he's a boy. If you're a rogue boy horse and someone's trying to, clip your unicorn wings, you're like, fuck off.
I like all those metaphors there.
They're really bad.
No, I'm spinning around. It's very good.
I'm spinning around too. That's why my brain isn't working. So he's really considered the father of criminology. He puts things in a place that we still use now. It's amazing to me. He approached everything with a different outlook and was open to anything. He introduces, undercover work. He has his employees that he pays, but that are criminals. He sort of is the originator of the informant. He figures out ballistics in a case, which I'll explain. He starts a record-keeping system for criminal investigation. He starts a record-keeping system where he creates indelible ink and unalterable bond paper. He employs chemists who do that. And so he can keep records on criminals. And that was what he had, used to forge things. He makes paper that's impossible to forge because he was a forger. I mean, he employs something called anthropometrics, which shows body measurements of, criminals as well as victims, like their, things. They would, keep descriptions of criminals, like brown hair, brown eyes. Oh, that's helpful. How tall would he be? How much would he weigh? They had never taken that information, and he created this system. He created the first plaster cast of shoe imprints of criminals.
Wow.
The first plaster cast, which is still used today.
Yeah. This guy's amazing.
It gets better. Wait till you hear. So he also says, look, I am not going to inform on anyone who steals out of real need, which later on becomes used as the storyline for Les Miserables. And both characters of Jean Valjean and the police officer are rolled into Jean Valjean, a criminal who steals bread to feed his family, and the officer who prosecutes him are rolled into one. They're both based on Vidocq. Both characters, lead characters for Les Miserables.
Well, who knew that?
I didn't until just now. I mean, he is amazeballs. I mean, reading the last 2 days, reading about him, I couldn't be more in love with him. I know he's a scoundrel, did some bad shit, but also did a lot of great shit. So he said, I would never inform on someone who stole out of real need. So there's part of his psychopathy that, he didn't steal out of need. He was a rich kid who stole things just to see if he could do it. And he would see people who would steal, who did have a need, and wouldn't inform on them. It's just, and unfortunately, because of his criminal past, his work in France wasn't really appreciated at the time. Some people, I guess when you're such a polarizing figure, some people think you're fantastic and some people think you're shit. So in 1905, when the Sûreté Nationale exhibits paintings of the former heads of the police agency, the first painting they have that starts the series is Pierre Allard, and he's Vidocq's successor. They just act like he never even worked there.
Oh, that sucks.
It's horrible because he basically started the whole fucking thing. So when he, started working with the police, he developed something called the intelligence agency. I mean...
Wait, where have I heard that before?
Mm-hmm. So these agents are responsible for the detection of conspiracies and crap like that. And then there's the normal police that investigate common crimes like theft, fraud, prostitution, etc. So he developed a fucking, intelligence agency. It's to me, he's, kind of a pretty fucking awesome shit. So he gets his fellow agents, by the way, who he also hires women as the intelligence agency, and he gets them to wear plain clothes. He developed, the CIA or the FBI.
Both, sounds like.
He's amazing. So he gets them to wear plain clothes, and then when need be, disguises, depending on the situation. He hires men and women, pays them the same. And, most criminals didn't know who these people were. So they were able to get in and out of situations without being fingered as someone who's going to get them all arrested. It was fantastic. So this, group of intelligence agency officers that he, got together, they learned about crimes that were planned way ahead of time. They were able to catch criminals, red-handed. He also formulated a very different type of interrogation of criminals. To me, he's the good cop in the now well-known good cop, bad cop situation. So when he would capture someone, he would not take them to prison. He would take them to dinner.
Wow.
And then he would talk to them. And a lot of times, he's charming, whether it's a male or a female criminal. He's charming. And he would get them to talk about other crimes. He would oftentimes get them to confess. And then he would recruit them as future informants and agents.
Very smart.
It's just amazing. I mean, he doesn't take them right to jail. He's like, let me buy you dinner. Hey, what happened on that gig that you did? It's fantastic. So here is how he has actually influenced law enforcement agencies across the world. August Vollmer, who's the first police chief of Berkeley, California, was, sort of considered a leading figure in criminal justice in the United States. He obsessively studied the works of Vidocq and an Austrian criminal named Hans Gross. So he wants to reform the Berkeley police force. So he adopts these ideas for a reformed police agency from the International Association of Chiefs of Police. He sort of, gets that together. And that ends up, because of his obsessive work, researching Vidocq, that forms J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. So when I said sort of the CIA and the FBI, he's responsible for the FBI in my mind because he influenced August Vollmer, J. Edgar Hoover. So he's also responsible for Robert Peel establishing the Scotland Yard in 1829. So Robert Peel would send a committee of his officers in 1832 to confer with Vidocq for several days. And then in 1843, two commissars from Scotland Yard traveled to Paris for further training. They spent only 2 days with Pierre Allard, who was the chief of police, and they spent 1 week with Vidocq, accompanying him and his agents, seeing what they did in their Sûreté Nationale, their private, police group. He influenced, here he was, this criminal who has influenced so many police agencies throughout the world. It's fantastic. I mean, forensic science didn't exist in his day, and he came up with, chemical compounds that, helped, find counterfeiters. He filed a patent for a type of ink that would smear if you tried to amend a check that had already been written, so he could identify forgeries.
Wow.
I mean, he's amazing in everything that he did. His card filing system, he used the indelible ink in this card filing system so that criminals' files could not, fade over time, before printing became, the way it became. He was, spectacular. His ballistics, it was amazing. There was a very rich woman who was much younger than her husband, who she was cheating on him, and she was found shot in the head. And he talks with the older husband and says, you know what? He doesn't have the personality of a murderer. He says that. The personality of a murderer.
So now we're even getting into like what the BAU does today.
Well, wait till you find out. He had a combination of psychology and forensics. He in my mind, probably solved a case with the first use of ballistics. He checks the old husband's guns, and they have not been fired recently and had not been cleaned recently. He persuades the doctor who found the murdered wife to remove the bullet from her head. Even though she's a noblewoman and he shouldn't have done that, he persuades the doctor to do it secretly. The comparison of the bullet taken from her head is way too big to have fit in either of the husband's guns, which had not been fired. And he shows up at the noblewoman's lover's house and finds a few pieces of her jewelry. One piece he had sold to a fence and that fence was already trying to resell that ring. He finds the lover's gun, and the bullet fits the lover's gun.
Wow.
So he confronts the lover, and the lover confesses. I did it.
That's just awesome.
I mean, it's spectacular. I can't even, as far as like figuring out, modus operandi, as far as figuring that out, they find a door panel that's been, damaged by an offender in a murder. And he's like, there is only one person I know that could have done this. And the chief of police is standing next to him as they're taking notes on this crime. And he says, well, it couldn't have been him because he's been in prison. And then someone says, Chief, that guy escaped 8 days earlier. And they find him, and he confesses and had committed the burglary. And he knew because of the way he'd knocked down a door.
Wow.
I know.
You know what else? What that story sounds like a typical Sherlock Holmes story, where Inspector, whatever the Sherlock Holmes guy on Scotland Yard he was always up against, would be standing there saying, "Well, it couldn't be this, it couldn't be that," and Holmes just is standing there saying, "No, it's not who you think it is." I wonder if Conan Doyle based some of his stories on this what Vidocq did. I mean,
absolutely
unbelievable.
Absolutely, you will find that out. So he, really influenced many authors. Absolutely, they say Sherlock Holmes is based on some of Vidocq's, pursuits. Like I said, both characters from Victor Hugo's Les Miserables are, put together based on Vidocq. The reformed criminal Jean Valjean and police inspector Javert, were both modeled on Vidocq. Many authors are influenced by him. Edgar Allan Poe, the character of the inspector in The Murders in the Rue Morgue, which is really considered the first detective story. Vidocq is actually mentioned in the novel Moby Dick. He is mentioned in Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Edgar Allan Poe really loved him. Honoré de Balzac loved him, wrote a play about him. And absolutely, there's apparently many of his escapades influenced the actual creation of Sherlock Holmes. So after he resigns for the second time, after he's been brought back from his, police work, he is a rich man, but it doesn't last long. He, resigns in 1830, and he tried to start a printing company, a paper factory and a printing company, and he employed a lot of released convicts, again, both men and women. And that was a pretty big scandal because he, paid the women the same as the men. It is amazing that he, I think, tries to make up for some of his, horrible misspent youth by doing good things. So he employs all of these, released convicts. And it's like, oh no, you shouldn't pay them as much. They're just semi-skilled workers. They don't need food and clothing. And, and he's like, it's not going to be a cheaper workforce. I'm going to pay them for the work that they deserve because they're doing, this really difficult work. So in the end, he sort of is, helping with a few useful tips to solve a burglary in Fontainebleau, and he gets 8 people arrested, and then they ask him to come back as the chief of the Sûreté Nationale. So, he does this work, but I don't think his heart's in it anymore. I think he's a little bit done with that. So in his later life, he becomes, the subject of literature and a lot of public discussions. And in his later years, he actually publishes several books, which he, tries to kind of squash some of the rumors about his crazy life. But he also presents in 1844 an essay on prisons, penitentiaries, and the death penalty. So he had married his third wife, and in 1847, this cousin, in 1847, she died. They had been married for 17 years, and he didn't marry again, until he died. But he did have, several partners. So in 1849, he went to prison one last time on a charge of fraud. But in the end, that case was dropped. And he kind of withdrew more and more into his private life, and he would do small cases every now and then as a private investigator. And he had really great pain in his right arm. He had broken his arm as a youth, and it had never been set correctly, and it didn't heal properly. But, he had some investments, some of them not great investments. He lost a lot of money, so he kind of made his lifestyle a little bit smaller. And in the end, he ended up just living in a rented place by himself. And even in 1854, just a few years before he died, a doctor gave him a really difficult prognosis of cholera, but he actually survived it. And then in 1857, his condition deteriorated and he couldn't stand up anymore. And he died in his home in the presence of his doctor, his lawyer, and a priest, which is sort of interesting. So, years after his death, there are still things written about him, plays, films. In 1909, a short black and white silent film was based on his life. In 1946, the first American film about him was called A Scandal in Paris, and George Sanders starred as Vidocq. In 1967, there's French television shows called Vidocq, many series, episodes that are about him that stars, I guess it ran from 67 to 71 and starred Claude Brasseur. In 2001, there is a film called Vidocq that stars Gerard Depardieu as Vidocq. There was a television show, again in France, about Eugene Vidocq, and it was called The Adventure of Criminalistics. And even as, recent as 2017, there's a film starring Vincent Cassel called Vidocq. There are cartoons, comics, anime about Vidocq, and my favorite reference so far is the video game Assassin's Creed Unity, and it takes place during the French Revolution. And there's a main character named Arnaud, and he is in prison, and there's a youthful version of Vidocq found in an adjacent cell who's kind of whispering advice to Arnaud and saying, "Look, let me out and I'll help you solve cases."
Oh, that's hilarious.
It's the sweetest thing. It's a lovely nod to someone who was, by all accounts, not, a great young man, but transformed himself into a really interesting and helpful, older, mature adult who influenced so many things in our world. And I'm forever grateful to Eugene Vidocq and really grateful to Frank Bender for the Vidocq Society for bringing that name into my realm so I could find out about him. And I hope that you enjoyed this episode and more cowbell.
And remember, you want to become a patron of the podcast? Go to patreon.com/Just the Tipsters. Give us a call at 832-TIPSTER. Send us an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. Talk to you next time.